Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriritam Kalmashapaham Sravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Bhurida Jana. So we were in the last section of the chapter, the 8th chapter of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Master's birthday celebration. So here in the last section we find that some Brahmo devotee who was present in Dakshineshwar is asking Sri Ramakrishna a question. What's that? Sir, how do you feel in Samadhi? So the Master now and then used to go into the state of trance, which we call Samadhi. So now here we find that one of the Brahmo devotees, his name was Amrita, he's asking, Sir, how do you feel in Samadhi? So Sri Ramakrishna's reply, Master, you may have heard that the cockroach, by intently meditating on the Brahmara, is transformed into a Brahmara. So now this is something which is mentioned in some of the scriptures. So what's that idea? That it's not a very accurate observation. Most probably a type of bee in which the cockroach will be entering into its nest. It's not exactly that the bee means it will enter into the nest, it will be getting trapped into it, and most probably the bee will be just feeding on that cockroach. So in those olden days they saw the cockroach getting trapped into the nest of the bee, but they never saw it coming out. What they saw coming out was just the bee. So from that they got the notion that the cockroach enters into the nest of the bee, and by intently thinking of the bee gets transformed into the bee. So that's what from the scripture Sri Ramakrishna is quoting, that you have heard that the cockroach, by intently meditating on the Brahmara, is transformed into a Brahmara. So it may not be factual, but the idea behind is that one on whom you meditate, gradually you get transformed into that character. You will find that even in our day-to-day life, that when the children watch some movie, they develop the tendency to dress like the character in the movie. That after seeing the Superman, they will just go to the shop, buy the vest with that S mark. So they also start feeling that they are as if identified with that character. So that's the idea, that by meditating on something, you gradually imbibe all the attributes which that character represents. It's a process of internalization. So that's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that what happens in the Samadhi, the object on which you are meditating, you become one with it. Now, in the basic level, we understand that we start as if internalizing all the attributes, the characters which that character represents. That happens in the initial state. But here what Sri Ramakrishna is speaking is the total transformation. It do happen in meditation. What he is speaking of is known as Triputi Bheda in our scriptures. the collapsing of the triad. What it is speaking of? That when I am meditating on something, an ishta, an object of meditation, I most probably am fond of a particular aspect of the divinity, and I get initiated in a mantra which represents that aspect of the divinity. And when I get initiated, what's the thing? I am given a mantra which is the name of that particular aspect of the divinity, and I am asked to meditate on the form of that divinity as if sitting in my heart. That itself speaks of internalization, that the divinity is not somewhere outside. He is inside me. He is the core of my being. This itself, at the very beginning, has some great transformative effect. What's the transformative effect? As long as you are keeping the deity outside, you will find that it is a very common practice. We attribute all the good qualities to the deity, that he is perfect and I am imperfect. And what our worship is then? I go and say that, oh, I am imperfect, you are the one who is perfect, please forgive me. The question of internalizing those values, that doesn't come. We find in all the deistic religion that I am the one who is papi, that I have all the evil qualities within me. The deity is something outside me, and he represents all the perfection. I bow down to him, never feeling that I have to internalize those attributes, those godly attributes in my life. So here, that's why they call this ahangraha upasana. In our scripture, it is mentioned that is a special type of worship. Instead of thinking the deity something apart from you, think of him as if sitting in your heart. Instead of worshipping the vigraha, it is ahangraha, that you yourself are the vigraha. This devang bhutva devang yajat. This is the idea behind the worship. That be the deva, be godly, to really worship the God. Even in the Bible we find that idea. Worship the Spirit by the Spirit. That one is the effect. What is the good effect of it? First is you're internalizing all the divine attributes within yourself. You're trying to transform your life by internalizing those values. And another thing is happen. What happens? When you're worshipping the Spirit by the Spirit, then you won't be desiring something of this world. For most of us, God is just the means, world is the end. That I want good health, I want good job, I want establishment in life. So this world is the end. God is just the means. He is just the means who will be providing me with all those things. So as long as God is something external, our worship can be very, very materialistic. I don't want God. He is just the means to provide me the things of the world. So when you worship the Spirit as the Spirit, by the Spirit, what happens? Then that idea, then you identify yourself not with this physical body. You are identifying yourself with the spiritual dimension of your existence. And God is, as the Spirit He is, through eternity He was, He is, He will be. And as the core of my being is concerned, which is the Spirit, which is the soul, that also is eternal. It was, it is, it will be. This my physical existence is something which is temporary. I was born at a certain point of time, I am going through some transformations, and I am going to die at a certain point of time. This is not the real me. This is just something which is superficial. The real me is eternal. And my communion with the divine is eternal. I am in eternal companionship with the divine. So when I worship the Spirit, by thinking the God to be the core of my being, then I get established in the idea that I am not this body-mind complex. I am eternal. So this worldly gains become something insignificant. it helps me to transcend the sufferings of life. In this life, we should know that however we may try, we can never get off all the hindrances, all the sufferings in life. In some form or other, it will be there. I can never ever have what I desire. The life takes its own course, and I am bound to find with all my progress that at one point of time or at some other point, I am as if at the edge of a precipice. I cannot proceed anymore. And unless I relate to the spiritual dimension of existence, I can never ever get a sense of fulfillment in this life. So it is not by trying to get rid of all the so-called sufferings and problems of life. I can never do that. In some form or other, it will be there. That's the way of life. But when I am worshipping God as the core of my being, then what happens? That identifications give me that sense that this is after all a passing phase. This in no way touches the real me. And that way, the problems remain. But I transcend them. They don't no more affect me. So that's a very initial stage. But what Sri Ramakrishna is saying here, it speaks of the highest spiritual evolution. What happens? That when I am meditating the divine on my heart, I am trying to visualize it, I am trying to repeat its name, and keeping my mind focused in his thought. Gradually what happens through this practice, I develop a love for the practice. As we say again and again, that what you do repeatedly, you gradually develop a love for it. And when that love comes, the devotion comes through this practice, then the meditation becomes real effective. That my devotion is involved. And by now my mind gets spontaneously focused. There is no need to force it. It gets spontaneously focused. And when it gets spontaneously focused to the object of your meditation, what happens? Other things starts falling off. First, the external distraction starts falling off. As your mind is focused to one thing, the other things cannot be processed. And then first the external things falls off, and then even your bodily feelings falls off. All the bodily feelings in the form of hunger, thirst, tiredness, everything is a biological alarm which needs a part of my mind to be processed to really feel them. But when your mind becomes externally focused, the mind cannot process them anymore. So external distractions falls off, bodily feelings falls off. Your mind is getting more and more focused on your object of meditation. And the last thing to fall off is the ego, the sense that I am this body-mind complex. And then what happens, we will find that however my mind be focused, I can never get rid of these three things as long as the ego is still there, ego is intact. A part of my mind is always holding into the ego. I can never get rid of it. That is the optimal part of the mind which is always holding to that ego. I am always aware that I am this body-mind complex. In intense meditation, what happens? At last, even that ego, the part of the mind which is holding onto the idea that I am this body-mind complex, that also is taken away by the object of meditation. And then what happens? That's what is called samadhi, triputi bheda. That now I have the idea that I am the one who is meditating. There's an object of meditation, and the process of meditation is connecting the meditator and the object of meditation. So in Sanskrit they call dhyana, dhyata, dhyeya. Dhyeya is the object of meditation. Dhyata is the one who is meditating, and dhyana is the process by which these two are connected. How long this connection is there? As long as the ego is there, as long as the ego is there, these three are bound to be there. The moment that ego also falls off, your meditation has become so intense that the mind cannot process the ego also. The reflection of the self on this body-mind complex which creates the ego, that also has been taken away by your object of meditation. Then what happens? This dhyana, dhyata, dheya, this triad collapses. Triputi bheda. That's what is called this collapsing of the triad. And that results in what? that results in your identification with the object of meditation. That you can no more feel that I am meditating on the object of meditation. You become as if one with the object of meditation. So in the spiritual sense, that's the real transformation which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of here. That though at the very beginning I feel because of the sense of awe, which makes me identified with the object of meditation, by trying to internalize those attributes. That's the very initial stage. But in the final stage, that the real identification happens, where the ego falls off, and that's been spoken of as this becoming one with the object of meditation. That you have heard that the cockroach, by intently meditating on the Brahmara, is transformed into a Brahmana. Do you know how I feel then? I feel like a fish released from a pot into the water of the Ganges. So just see that the moment your ego falls off, you become one with the object of meditation. That's one thing. And the second thing is, your sense of locality falls off. That as long as I am in this body-mind complex, I may stop my interaction with the world. I may close my eyes. I may just stop by plugging my ears, stop hearing anything. All the five senses can be stopped. I can be sitting in a very dark room where no sound enters, totally insulated. But can I get rid of the idea that I am sitting in some spot? I can never get rid of that idea. That I am localized. I am, and that amness is emanating from a center. And when you go to that, when you become one with the object of meditation, how it has happened? By the falling off the ego. The ego has fallen off. And then that amness is still there. But your amness is no more having any locality. It has gone beyond the idea of time, space, causation. And that's what, in simple words, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. How he's saying? Do you know how do I feel then? I feel like a fish released from a pot into the water of the Ganges. That I was localized into that pot. I am released. Now as if that sense of locality has vanished. I'm just swimming in the boundless water of the river. As if there is nothing to bind me. The pond was there previously, the pond was there to bind me. That boundary has fallen off. Now I'm free. So that's the idea of non-locality. So one is identification, and the second is this idea of non-locality. That's the thing Sri Ramakrishna in his words, how nicely he's speaking. And then Amrita again asked, do you feel at that time even a trace of ego? Master, yes, generally a little of it remains. However hard you may rub a grain of gold against a grindstone, still a bit of it always remains. Or again, take the case of a big fire. The ego is like one of its sparks. In Samadhi, I lose outer consciousness completely. But God generally keeps a little trace of ego in me for the enjoyment of divine communion. Enjoyment is possible only when I and you remain. So this is the idea of Savikalpa Samadhi. There's two types of Samadhi. First is Savikalpa, and then it is Nirvikalpa. The word Vikalpa means what? Alternative. Something in Sanskrit. What is alternative? Our language is Vikalpa. See, when I see a rose, there is no need for any language to have the experience of the rose. Whether I say it rose, whether I say gulab, whatever I say, the experience is the same. But for our day-to-day convenience, we just use a language that what I experience, that I encode in the word called rose. So now even when rose is not present, I use the word. Those who have similar experience can decode it. Because they have similar experiences. The moment they hear the word rose, the picture of it, even the rose is not there, that is something he will be visualizing in his mind. So this is what called vikalpa. So now, when a person is entering into the state where his ego has fallen off, but he is identified with the object of meditation, still that form is there with which he is identified. So the vikalpa, the idea of God. See here, this wonderful idea. We will find, what's that idea? That even in our scriptures they say that the ultimate reality is formless. But you can go through the form, to that as domain of formless. First you become identified with the form, and that becomes the only reality. It loses a sense of locality, as we find even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, Jatra jatra netra pade, tatra tatra Krishna sphure. That as his ego has dissolved, he has now become one with the object of meditation. He sees Krishna everywhere. The locality has vanished. So that's the idea of Savikalpa Samadhi. So when you see Krishna everywhere, then what happens? The trace of ego is still there. It's not totally vanished. Trace is there to enjoy the bliss of communion with the divine. They say that you go to that state of nirvikalpa and again you come back to the state of savikalpa to remain in the domain of me and you, to enjoy the bliss of meditation. So, in a simple words we can say that first my mind was distracted. In Savikalpa Samadhi what has happened? That is only one vritti. That vritti are called Ishta vritti. That alone is there. And as long as the vritti is there, ego is there. Without ego, the vrittis won't be there. So little ego is there to enjoy the communion with the divine. So that's the idea of you and me. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. That little trace of that ego remains so that he can enjoy. That yes, generally a little of it remains. However hard you may rub a grain of gold against a grindstone, still a bit of it always remains. Or again, take the case of a big fire. The ego is like one of its sparks. In Samadhi, I lose outer consciousness completely, but God generally keeps a little trace of ego in me for the enjoyment of divine communion. Enjoyment is possible only when I and you remain. So that's the state of the Savikalpa Samadhi. But there is a state even after that. And that's Sri Ramakrishna is saying next. Again sometimes God effaces even the trace of I. Then one remains Jara, then one experiences Jara Samadhi or Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That experience cannot be described. A salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean, but before it had gone far into the water, it melted away. It became entirely one with the water of the ocean. Then who was to come back and tell the ocean's depth? So this is the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where that Ekagra Vritti also falls off. As we again and again describe this state of Nirvikalpa, what happens? That in this world, we will find that everything is flowing. Samsarate iti sangsara. Why it is called sangsara? Because everything is flowing. The mind also is a part of the samsara because it is also constantly flowing. You will find that the so-called, for a common person, his mind is constantly jumping from thought to thought. It can never stay in one thought. Now for a spiritual practitioner, through practice, he has got rid of the distraction and can keep his mind in one thought. Initially what happens? Though he has developed concentration, but his subconscious mind is still having all those vrittis. They're still there. They have not been washed away. So though I keep my mind concentrated, now and then the sarvarthata, the distraction come and breaks my meditation. But if I go on meditating, this ekagra vritti goes on concentrating my subconscious mind, saturating my subconscious mind, and all the distractions get washed off. A time comes when my mind is habitually ekagra. It has only ekagra vritti. all the distractions have been washed off. After that, when that happens, you are constantly in communion with the divine. You are the God is. That's the second state which Sri Ramakrishna spoke of. And then what happens? Now, in this world, why everything is a flow? Because there is a polarity. That example which we give again and again. Water flows from higher level to lower level. If both the levels are same, there is no flow of water. Electricity flows because of a difference of potential. If both ends have same potential, current doesn't flow. So whenever the potentiality is resolved, the flow stops. The mind also is flowing. Why it is flowing? Because it jumps from thought to thought. If I have developed the capacity to keep the mind in one thought, when that one thought becomes very intense, then what happens? The polarity has been resolved. The thought itself, that is no more there. You go to the state of thoughtlessness that has been spoken of as a state of nirodha. The mind has totally collapsed because you have resolved the polarity. And that's the state where it is called the state of nirvikalpa samadhi. You have got beyond all vikalpa. As long as the vrittis are there, the vikalpa is bound to be there. The moment the vritti is not there, there is no vikalpa. And then you have entered into a state of nirvikalpa samadhi, where it is impossible to describe the state because the mind is no more there. You have become one with what you are. That example which we give, that the mind is like a prism and our self is as if like the white light. When the white light falls on the prism, it breaks into the spectrum of the 7 colors. This world is the spectrum of Nama Rupa. The mind collapses. The spectrum is no more there. Where it has gone? It has merged in the white light. It has become one with that. So that's the state, the highest state which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of. The salt doll going to measure the depth of the ocean merges into it. So that's the way Sri Ramakrishna is speaking. That's the state of nirvikalpa samadhi. What he's saying, again sometimes God effaces even the trace of I. Then one experiences jara samadhi or nirvikalpa samadhi. That experience cannot be described. A salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean, but before it had gone far into the water, it melted away. It became entirely one with the water of the ocean. Then who was to come back and tell the depth of the ocean? So here ends the 8th chapter. Now today we will start the 9th chapter, which is the advice to the Brahmos. So Sri Ramakrishna was a frequent visitor of Brahmo Samaj. He used to go there and to interact with the Brahmo devotees. So this chapter is the chapter which deals with Sri Ramakrishna's visit to the Brahmo Samaj and where he is having interaction with the Brahmo devotees. Saturday, April 7, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was visiting Balaram in Calcutta with Narendra, Bhavanath, Rakhal, Aim and others. Balaram at the master's bidding had invited some of the young devotees to lunch. Sri Ramakrishna often said to him, "Feed them now and then. That will confer on you the merit of feeding holy men." This feeding holy men. So this is considered as punya. And these young men, these all young boys who are aspiring to lead a life of a total renunciate, being inspired by Sri Ramakrishna. They are yet to leave their hearth and home. But Sri Ramakrishna knows that they are the pure soul who are going to be the great sannyasins. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying that it is as good to feed them. That way you think that feeding the holy men is good. These young boys, they are the holiest of the holy. So that's what he's saying, feed them now and then. That will confer on you the merit of feeding holy men. Now, why feeding the holy men is considered as punya? It's a very nice thing. It's that we may forget about the spiritual aspect. Even from our earthly point of view, that feeding the holy men means sustaining them, why it is considered a meritorious act. Just see, even in the modern day, if you go to any university, there's a faculty of research work. There's all the PhD students there, even the post doctorate, there's research, postdoctorate research, all those research scholars are there. Not only that, many of the so-called multinationals, they will have a cell for research separately. Why do they have? Do all the research are something very genuine? No. You will find that most of the research is having no such implication in our day-to-day life. It may be very abstract. It may help us to gain some knowledge, but as such, its implications in our society is not that high. And sometimes some of the research are trash. It has no value. But still we find that all the universities, all these big multinational organizations will have this research cell. Why? That though they know that most of the research is going to be trash, but still they go on financing it. Why? That in spite of the fact that most of the research is not going to be any productive for the society, but suddenly one research work can lead to a huge transformation in the society. That's what has happened. That's how we have advanced, that through all those leaps in our scientific discoveries. So what's the idea behind it? That unless we keep the research cell, knowing very well it is not going to give me any financial benefit, but still we keep it, knowing very well that gradually some of the research, not all, that is going to bring a huge transformation in the society. The same thing in spiritual life, that there should be some people who should dedicate their entire life for the spiritual pursuit alone. It's not that all of them are going to be illumined soul. That's even in the scriptures they mention that even if 100 persons are trying, maybe 1 or 2 may get illumined. Then why should that society sustain them? Because from that effect, if we have that system where the holy men are taken care of by the society, then what happens? Now and then we will get a real illumined soul. Like all these saints, prophets. As the social structure was there to sustain them. Why in India we get so many great men? Because still we find that system is there. The social structure is there, where the holy men are taken care of by the society. And that's why we find that now and then illumined souls are coming out of that lot. It's not all of them are there. But as we have maintained that structure, and once a saint gets illumined, he becomes the transforming factor, spiritually this benefactor for the entire society. His words, his teaching, his wisdom, that becomes the guiding force for the entire society. So now, even from this point, we will find that why it has been said that this holy man has to be fed, has to be revered. So that way we are keeping the spiritual tradition alive. Otherwise it will die. Because spirituality is not only in the mere words, in the books. Unless someone is leading that life and his life starts representing the wisdom of the scripture, the scripture is of no use. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that at the almanac, the almanac forecasts that there is going to be torrential rain. But you go and squeeze the almanac, not a single drop of water will come out of it. That as long as no water comes out of it, it is just a book. So unless the words of the scripture finds expression through a life, those words have no value. So as this society where these saints are trying to live the life as per the scripture and transform their life, so that that life becomes the illumination for the entire society. It is the duty of the society to take care of this such structure, where some people should be there who dedicate their life exclusively for the spirituality, and the society takes care of them. So that's why it is being mentioned that it is a merit for feeding a holy man. And we all know the 16 young men who gathered around Ramakrishna, that they did prove to be the great monks in the future, as Sri Ramakrishna has told. Just see how Sri Ramakrishna could see the future. Then in the gospel, again and again, you find that these indications are there. So just seeing this young boy, they were all teenagers. They are yet to grow into an adult person. They were all teenagers. They were all in their teens. And seeing them, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, what? Feed them now and then. That will confer on you the merit of feeding holy men. He knew what they are going to be. The master looked on his young disciples, yet untouched by woman and gold, as veritable embodiments of God. A few days earlier, Sri Ramakrishna had been to Keshav's house with Narendra and Rakhal to see a performance of the play entitled Nava Vrindavan. Narendra had taken part in the performance, in which Keshav had played the role of Pawhari Baba. Master, Keshav came on the stage in the role of a holy man and sprinkled the water of peace, but I didn't like it. The idea of sprinkling such a water on a theatrical stage after a performance. Another gentleman played the part of sin. That is not good either. One should not commit sin. One should not even feign it. So this idea, first he's saying this idea of sprinkling this holy water. Why? So these are considered to be very sacred act. So when any sacred act, we try to dilute it by doing some theatrical performances, its sanctity is lost. The sanctity is lost. This is a very important thing. So nowadays you will find that in India, because of the prevalence of media, prevalence of these electronic gadgets, this Gayatri mantra previously in the olden days, it used to be whispered into the ear of a Dvija, the one who is getting Upanayana. In his ear, this mantra was told, which he was supposed to repeat for the rest of his life. And he is not supposed to just simply recite it in front of others. It has to be kept secret and sacred. And many says that this actually proves of the exclusivity of the Brahmin class, without understanding the real meaning of the idea behind it. What's the real idea behind it? Now when you go to a shrine, a very interesting thing, that suppose your mind is not very elevated and you go to a temple and suddenly you find your mind has changed. Because the temple is a place where all people go to pray to the divine, to contemplate, to meditate. So it is full of those vibrations. The mind has its vibrations and it do affect us. So the moment I go to a temple, most probably I was not in a very uplifted mood, but the moment I enter, I find my mind is changing. It happens even in the place of pilgrim, if you go. But is the place of pilgrim to be credited for that? Actually, it's not so. It's not something, a miraculous place. What has happened for thousands of years, for hundreds of years, people have visited that place exclusively to practice spiritual disciplines. And that's the vibration of the place. The vibration do affect us. You will find, you go to any of the funeral place here in Australia. I find the most beautiful gardens there. The huge place funeral. Have you found anyone going for walk there? Such a nice clean road, beautiful garden. The moment you enter there, Even it's not that any of your relative have passed away, your friends. You just went for a walk. Immediately you find that the place is a bit gloomy with all its beautiful garden and everything. You never enjoy a walk there. No one goes to walk in the so-called the garden of the funeral. What it speaks of? Again, that all the people who are going there, they are all mourning. They are all mourning because the death of the near and dear ones. And that's the vibration of that place. And that do affect us. So our mental vibrations do affect just the way, and these vibrations have frequency, particular frequency. That's why Swamiji in his Karma Yoga starts with that if you develop the habit of thinking good thoughts, you will find automatically you are thinking more and more good thoughts. And your actions also ensue from that good thoughts. And if you are constantly delving in some negative thoughts, your mind will be again more and more getting absorbed in negative thoughts, and that will be the trend of your life. And then he says what? He says this atmosphere is full of those thoughts. Nothing is lost. In this world, even in science, we say that there is no energy is lost. Then how come this thought, which is also a form of energy, gets lost? It can never get lost. It is there in this our atmosphere in the form of vibrations. Nowadays, it's very easy to understand. There's a mobile phone. When you call someone, and it goes, and that you are just ringing the number, it goes and rings. What has on that particular frequency, which has been generated from your phone, it connects to the other phone. The frequency have matched. You turn on the radio in a particular frequency, it matches. You turn a particular channel on the TV, it matches. Similarly, the thought waves, it has its particular frequency. Now you will understand the importance of keeping all the spiritual practices, the mantras, very secret and sacred. Why? You should not simply make fun of it or make a theatrical performance of it. It has to be kept very, very pure, and it has to be used exclusively for what has been asked you by your spiritual predecessor without divulging it to others. Why? Because these ideas, these acts, these mantras are associated with tradition. That my guru was initiated by his guru. And like that's this parampara of gurus. That's what's called this parampara. Through succession, this mantra was that one got realized, one got spiritually advanced, and then he is divulging the mantra. He is whispering the mantra to a disciple whom he finds is prepared, not to all, who will take this sincerely. He takes this mantra and then he leads his life, and then again, when he is advanced, he transforms to others. So this mantra, just as your mobile number is tuned to a particular frequency, this mantra gets tuned to a particular mental vibration. So that's why it has to be kept very secret and sacred. There is no sense of exclusiveness. The one who is sincere, only to him you give. Nowadays you play it in in India we find that on social event in the tape recorder, in this music player, it is being played, broadcasted loudly. All are chit-chatting, making fun, and that's going on. In the scriptures it is mentioned that this Gayatri is an extremely powerful mantra. How it developed that power? Because of that succession. It was never used for any simple worldly acts. Only when I sit for meditation, the Guru has given me this mantra, I sit down with pure mind, I try to meditate, and it retains that vibration. This mantra is associated with that vibration, it retains. And it becomes very powerful. When I get initiated, I am getting the help of the spiritual practices done by all my predecessors. That's why spiritual lineage is also called a family of the spiritual illumined souls. It's a family. Just the way when a baby is born, through the the sperms, the DNA is transformed. Here through the mantra, that is also like the DNA. your spiritual power is transferred. And it helps a person to get spiritually illumined very quickly, because he is already getting the help of the spiritual practices and all the mental vibrations they have created. He's getting it. He's getting tuned to it just by holding to this mantra. And now if you use that mantra for in movie, in theater, and just that it loses, that lot of noise gets associated with it. It loses its sanctity. That power it has generated, it has lost. So that's why this sprinkling of holy water, it's done at the time of initiation. These are the acts which they do. It is associated with all those things. And now you're using it in the theater. So that way it loses. In the theater, of course, you are not doing with that intention of spiritual purification. It's done just for entertainment. And it loses its efficacy, its sanctity. So we should be very responsible. We shouldn't use it for such social events, social activities, or for some entertainment. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying that I didn't like that idea of sprinkling of that holy water. And also I don't like that someone should be enacting the role of sin. Because where you keep your mind, that becomes your character. That whatever environment your mind is, the mind takes the taint off. Okay, that it gets tainted by the environment, and that becomes your second nature in due course of time. That what you think, that you become. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is again saying that someone was playing the role of this sin. That is not good either. One should not commit sin. One should not even feign it, because that starts affecting your character. True renunciation. Narendra said to the master with a smile, referring to Bhavanath, he has given up fish and betel leaf. The master, Sri Ramakrishna, is very specific about renunciation. That he is saying that renunciation of fish and betel leaf is no renunciation. The renunciation of woman and gold is true renunciation. So this is a very, very specific thing which Sri Ramakrishna is saying. That why? That what's the thing which really binds us from a small microbe till the human, this entire gamut of living organism? What's the two things common? That we have to sustain ourselves, we have to take food. As a human being, to get food, I need wealth. And to continue to propagate, the life should propagate. The nature should propagate. For that, one has to procreate. Even a bacteria is doing that. And all the creatures are doing that. And as a human, we are doing that. As a result, what has happened? That the moment the self gets reflected in the body-mind complex, even in a microbe, these are the two traits which evolves, which starts. The nature has made us that way. And as we tell that what I do repeatedly, that becomes my nature. I forget the necessity, that becomes my obsession. So what's the cause of the bondage? The ego. The moment the ego has generated through the entire process of evolution, these two things are the most common, and they have created a very deep groove in our mind. Unless these two, this intent groove, this very deep groove in the mind, we can get rid of, there is no question of getting liberated from this egoistic existence. It is impossible. So these two are the main thing which speaks of renunciation. If one can renounce that, other things are all superficial. These two are the deepest groove in our mind. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. Pan mach tag tagi noy. Kamini kanchon tagi tag. So this in our entire Hinduism has become so much that branded with all the food habits, with particular way of dressing. All those things we think makes us religious. So Sri Ramakrishna is very particular. We will find that Swami Vivekananda, when he went in the West, in those days, that no one were familiar with monks. The way as a sadhu dresses. That's why we find Swamiji used to face a lot of persecution. Someone will pull his turban, and then we find there are so many photos of Swamiji just in Western dress. In our scriptures, they say that there is a specific class of sannyasis. They are called Paramahansas. For them, there is no restriction for dress, food, nothing. So we say the tradition of Ramakrishna Paramahansa. These are the lineage of Paramahansa. What's there here? All those external paraphernalia, which makes us dharma dhwaji. By wearing a particular type of dress, as if I am hoisting a flag which says I am religious. This is called dharma dhwaji. So Sri Ramakrishna at the very beginning is saying that know it for certain to be really religious. Don't saturate your ego. What you say, that concentrate your ego, intensify your ego by this dharma dhvajitva. In the name of religion, we will find that the religious people sometimes becomes the most egoistic. They are a glutton. Their ego means to satisfy their ego has become like a glutton. Without having lot of food, cannot feel satiated. Sometimes we find in the name of religion, even ordinary man doesn't have that type of ego. We develop that ego. We become a glutton, egoistic glutton. Our ego has to be satiated in so many ways, and we take the form of this dharma dhvajitva to satiate our ego. Sri Ramakrishna is plainly saying that all those external paraphernalia is of no use unless these two basic things you have taken care of. That's why Sri Ramakrishna, when someone told Naren has some food habits which is not commendable, Sri Ramakrishna in one word simply brushes off. He's saying the one who does Havishana means takes boiled food only with little ghee, very simple food. But his mind is in Kamini Kanchan. His mind is always dwelling in woman and gold, in lust and gold. Dhik take. I blame him, such a person. I consider such a person lowliest. And if anyone taking the meat of taking pork, shukorer mangsho, khe ishore mon rakhte pare. But his mind is always dwelling in God. He is the greatest devotee. This is a very important thing Sri Ramakrishna is saying. Why? Because with so much of paraphernalia, know it for certain, our food habits and that veg, non-veg, it's all useless. Why? The moment we are born, the moment we are hungry, we have to kill others. In Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, that wonderful line is there. Ashanaya hi mrityu. Hunger is death. The moment you are hungry, what to speak of hunger? As long as you are alive, you are constantly killing. Many say that the life forms we are killing, they are very lowly life forms. They are not that conscious. So, as we have to killing the lowly life forms is of no harmful. But now the modern research shows that even a tree screams, we don't hear that. When a leaf is torn, it is screaming. So what the nature has done, as it knows very well that without killing others I cannot sustain, it has done a wonderful thing. What has done? It has masked the other's feeling. So that what I have to do, I can do without any sense of guilt. I will just give an example. When someone is hanged, that because of some crime, because of some some grave crime, some capital punishment, as a capital punishment, he has to be hanged. You will find a thing that when a person is going to be hanged, the first thing they do is they will put a mask on that person. His face is covered. Why his face is covered? And then he will be hanged. Why his face is covered, Because when he is hanged, the face, out of pain, the face, the expression will be very terrible, and that will affect those who are hanging him. That can affect him at such an adverse way that throughout the life that person may develop some psychological problem. So to mask that feeling, they put the mask. So the nature has that thing done that thing wonderfully. When I kill the plant doesn't feel the way I kill some higher forms of life. They feel the same way. They scream. But the nature has masked that feeling so that I can do the thing which I have to do. You see the entire plan of the nature. Can you go and say a lion to become a non-vegetarian? To a vegetarian? Impossible. The plan of the nature is such. So what is real non-violence? Very nicely in the commentary, Vyasa Bhashya of Yoga Sutra, very nicely it has been mentioned. What is the real non-violence? That live the life in such a way, by changing your mental orientation, not by doing some physical acts, your mental orientation in such a way that you need not have to be born again. Because to come down to the physical plane entails in hingsa. There cannot be a life without hingsa. You have to. So lead the life in such a way that you again need not be born again. So for that, what has to be done? Kama kanchana. Those two deep grooves has to be washed off. That's the renunciation. And then that can entail you not to gravitate. What gravitates us into the physical plane? The need to procreate, the need to take food. This is a so strong urge that forces us to again get embodied, take a body and come down. If you have controlled these two, the greatest force that brings us down to this physical plane is no more there. You have got rid of that. Very specific. Sri Ramakrishna is saying that don't simply make the religion a matter of propaganda. Lead a sincere religious life. That someone has renounced this bitter leaf and fish. It's something visible. But the real renunciation is the renunciation of lust and cold. That's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is very specifically mentioning. That's the thing which can entail in the real liberation. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying, the moment someone told, he's telling that Mach pan tag tagi noy, kamini kanchon tagi tag. So this renunciation of woman and gold is the true renunciation. Where is Rakhal? Someone asked. Now Sri Ramakrishna asked, a devotee, he is asleep, sir. The master with a smile. Once a man went to a certain place to see a theatrical performance, carrying a mat under his arm. Hearing that it would be some time before the performance began, he spread the mat on the floor and fell asleep. When he woke up, it was all over. All laugh. Then he returned home with the mat under his arm. So these words maybe seems to be just he is making joke. No. Each and every word of Sri Ramakrishna has a deep spiritual implication. In these words, we find a wonderful synthesis of Purushakara and Kripa. Purushakara and Kripa. There's another wonderful allegory of Sri Ramakrishna, that there were two farmers. One farmer was a traditional farmer. His forefathers have told, never listen to the forecast, plow the land in a particular time of the year. So he plowed the land. And another farmer, he thought he's intelligent. He have heard the forecast that there is not going to be any rain this year, so he didn't plow the land. And then the weather forecast proved to be false. Suddenly the rain came. Now who is going to get the benefit? The one who has plowed the land. When the rain comes, we don't know. But if I have not plowed the land, I am not going to get the benefit of the rain whenever it comes. So when the rain will come, that's Kripa. It's unpredictable. I don't know. But this plowing the land, that is Purushakara. I have to do my part. There are so many other factors which are also responsible for my spiritual evolution. Even in our day-to-day life, that we give so much importance to our intelligence. But we find with all our intelligence, is it the only factor that can help me get established in life? There are so many other factors which is beyond my control. So they also has to coalesce, come together along with my intelligence. Then only it can happen. So similarly in spiritual life too. So what it is speaking of? That the theatrical performance is going to have at a certain point of time. For me to experience it, I have to be awake. If I have fallen asleep, the theatrical performance won't be again repeated for me when I get to wake up. It has happened in its time. Same type of story we find even in the Bible. What's the story? The story of the bridegroom, the groom. The bride along with her other mates, the other female companion, they were all waiting for the groom to come. Now one of those mates fell asleep. So when the groom came, that the one who fell asleep couldn't see the groom. So when the groom will come, no one knows. But if I am not awake, if I am not alert, I will miss that communion, will not be there. So that's the idea we find. It just appears to be a simple joke, but no. That in spiritual life, do your part. When the theatrical performance will come, means when the Lord comes with His grace, I don't know. But if I have not done my part, if I am not awake, that is of no avail. I cannot get the benefit out of it. I cannot enjoy the theatrical performance. I cannot get the benefit out of it. So that's the synthesis of Purushakara and Kripa, which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking through these simple words. So with this, we stop our discussion today. We'll continue with the following portion of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna again in the next class. Thank you all. Namaskar.